Hello everyone. Waiting to see if you can hear me before I start.
I can hear you, John. It's Rob.
Oh, that's good. That's reassuring. Kath, as there are not many of us, is it possible for people to all have their mics unmuted so that they can speak rather than chat? Right, I'm now unmuted and it's being recorded too, I see. Okay, I'm going to welcome everybody to this webinar. This isn't meant to make anybody feel guilty. It's just to get the information. Have people managed to watch the webinar when Exeter, Manchester and UCL presented their different models? Okay, Kerry, I note that you can't put your mic on, which is fine. I'll just keep an eye on the chat so you can join in that way. So, confession time. Have you managed to see the webinar, the previous webinar that had 3 institutions presenting their different approaches?
Hello, Janet. It's Petra. Can you hear me? You should be.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, that's great. I started to watch and listen to that, but because it's quite a long recording, I didn't get all the way to the end of it.
Okay. And Barbara's not had a chance to see it either, and neither has Kerry. This was sort of what I thought might be the case. So what I'm going to do, I can kind of just recap very briefly on what I took from their different approaches. But when I introduced that webinar, and I'm sorry, it was a long webinar, it went on about an hour and a half, I presented a short model of the kinds of dimensions that I thought were the dimensions which made the models differ. So I think it would be useful if I represent that that little presentation. Now, Kath, it says here that GoToMeeting is sharing my screen. If I want to show the PowerPoint, do I simply, can people see the slides that I've just put up?
Janet, we can see it, but it's not in presentation mode. It's wrong.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure people could see it.
We can see it, yes.
Can see it. All right. What I'm going to do then, because once it's in presentation mode, I can't see the chat or anything. I'm just going to, it's not a very long presentation, it's only 7 slides. I'm just going to go through it, which will take me about, hopefully, between 5 and 10 minutes. I'll go through it in presentation mode, and then I'll switch it off again, and then I can see the chat. All right?
Yep, okay.
I can at least hear you, even though I can't see the chat or anything that's going on.
That's fine, Janet. That's good.
So I started off that webinar by suggesting that these were some key dimensions of difference. And I suppose what I'd like to invite you to do is to think about these dimensions in relation to the model in your own institution. So the first dimension was about what I called focus and boundaries. Is the focus of your personal tutor or academic advisor system in your institution on general academic progress, holistic personal development, possibly including employability? Is it developmental? Sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Is it on academic progress or is it on holistic personal development? Those are oppositions, that's a spectrum. I'm not reading my own slides properly. So is the focus, would you say, holistic or academic? Secondly, would you regard it as developmental and aimed at all students, or remedial, focused on students with problems? Or do you not see these as either ors? This is very much my personal model of for analysis. Linked to that very often is whether the system is delivered by academics or whether it's delivered by professional service staff. And that's of course not just an either or, it's the relationship between them as well. But is if you like, the first point of call an academic, or is it a student advisor who is not an academic? Third dimension of difference, is it primarily offered to groups or primarily offered, or solely sometimes offered to individuals? And the fourth point of difference, is there an intercurriculum element of it, or is it all intra-curriculum, possibly credit bearing, or is it entirely extracurriculum, meetings arranged outside the normal, if you like, credit hours? And I'll go through each of these as a dimension. The way I've designed these slides, the green is pros, the reds are cons. The blues are interesting, just things to think about. So, academic or professional? Obviously, if this was a slide about the professionals, these would be the other way around, but the cons of doing it through academics seem to be that academics say they don't have the time to do it. It's on top of their other jobs, research, teaching, admin, and so on. Also, many academics, it is said, don't have the skills, particularly the interpersonal skills, and they may also claim not to have the necessary knowledge, particularly if this is a holistic approach and dealing with issues such as employability. The pros of doing it via academics rather than designated professional services people. One might be, and I think this will probably link back to John Peters' webinar, that the being run by an academic might help to foster the student's sense of belonging to the institution. You'll remember that of Chickering and Gamson's 7 principles of success in undergraduate achievement, the first is staff-student contact, and by that they appear to mean primarily academic student contact. The other pro might well be that the academics understand the programme and its requirements better than professional staff can do. So those are the pros and cons of who actually delivers the, particularly the first point of contact. Focus, academic or pastoral. Again, the issues here, and I've put this one in green, and this actually seems really important to me. Can they actually effectively be separated? Because one so often involves the other. It does seem to me that a student can present with what is apparently an academic issue, and a few questions will very often elicit that there is a pastoral or a personal dimension to that. Similarly, a student can come along with what is clearly, the presenting issue is a personal issue, but it will have knock-on effects for that student's academic achievement. So is it possible to have a system where the academic and the pastoral are effectively separated? But on the other hand, does one person have the skills and knowledge to do both? And so for this slide, I've added at the bottom a possible strategy which many institutions have adopted, which is that the academic is the first port of call, but he or she acts as a signpost to other services, which might be faculty or departmentally or centrally based. However, I note in red that signposting itself is a tricky interpersonal skill because it requires the first point of contact person, who, let's say at the moment is the academic, to have the kind of interpersonal skills that will make a student feel that they're concerned about them and they're referring them on, not because they can't be bothered, but because they genuinely feel that's the best way to help the student. And that does require a little bit of interpersonal skill. Coming on to the next issue, intra or extracurricular. Again, I've just dealt with one of these because the other is the kind of opposite. So if you do it inside the curriculum, that's as a module or this kind of course, some kind of course. It's more likely that students will attend because the course will be timetabled and it will be credit bearing. However, this means that you'll be dealing with groups rather than individuals. It's therefore, and I'll repeat this, this will come up again under another slide, it therefore may not be suitable, well, it's unsuitable for individual reviews of progress. Of course, you could have a module which is delivered to whole tutor groups, and that could accommodate weeks where there are individual tutorial slots for progress review. It does, of course, take up curriculum time, and academics sometimes object to this kind of module by saying, you know, the curriculum's crowded already. A slightly more, to me, a more serious problem is it can be seen as low status, and that impacts on the individual who delivers this. It's not a good thing if the academic who's responsible for delivering the kind of course or the sort of personal development or personal skills course is somehow that impacts on their status as an academic. Actually, what happens quite often is that one or two people are responsible for delivering it, but all academic tutors are involved in kind of group tutorials within that module, and that does seem to be quite a successful way of doing it. One big advantage of doing that is it can focus on discipline-related skills, and can therefore, because of that, it makes sense to involve the whole academic program team as the group tutors. And it might motivate students more because they see what they're doing as being related to their discipline and not just as they see it, personal development. However, if you do that, it's not going to address the seem to differ on some significant aspects of that. So, to
Janet,
yeah?
we've got a slight problem in that we've had a problem with Kath being offline. So you'll see in the chat that the meeting is going to end, but I think Kath has hopefully now rejoined.
Okay.
So it's just to alert everybody to the possibility that if it goes dead, it's not because we've all gone to the pub for a Christmas drink, it's because there's some gubbins in the works, but hopefully we can continue. Sorry. Thanks, Kerry, for pointing that out.
Could you still hear me?
We could hear you fine. There was no problem with that. It's just that for some reason Kath went offline, and as she's the organiser, the meeting comes to a not very helpful end. But you couldn't see the chat within which we could see that. So hopefully we're still good.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to flick through this, the dimensions again. So I talked about the focus of the system and the boundaries of that system, who delivers it, whether it's primarily academics or professional services, whether it's primarily groups or individuals, and whether it's primarily intra-curriculum and credit-bearing or extracurriculum. And I'm sure that there's spectra with all of those. So what I'd be interested in now is hearing whether these are relevant dimensions to your own systems. And I'm going to come out of this and get back into the webinar. Okay, I'm back.
Janet, it's Rob. Might it be feasible just to put up that last slide in some form? Because it's...
the resources slide?
No, the slide with the kind of summation on it.
It was actually the first slide, but I can certainly put that up again. Yeah.
The last one you showed, or almost the last one you showed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not making it more difficult. I just think it might be helpful to have a... yeah, that's the one. So can you still see the chat now?
I can't, but...
okay, that's not going to work. Okay.
Well, I can leave it in non presentation mode like that.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Right, make it a bit bigger. Hang on.
That'd be good.
There. Okay.
Yeah. Just think it might be
and
helpful.
just go back into the. Okay, is that on your screen now?
No, it's gone now.
No, that's because I went back to the chat. Yeah, I can do that now. Right. If you can see that, I can see the chat and I can see the things. So.
And I guess your question is how far that resonates with people in terms of thinking about their provision.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's gone again.
Well, it's me. I pressed the wrong button then. Okay, over to you people, and your mics are unmuted, I think.
Well,
whenever I press anything, it disappears. Okay, so for Barbara, it looks as though some of those dimensions would actually apply quite well in trying to describe her institutional issues. Yeah, Kerry says there's a lot of signposting work. I mean, I'm sure that even when it is an academic, as the first point of call, they have to learn to signpost fairly quickly, otherwise they'd be overwhelmed. One of the things that quite interests me as an educational developer is how you train people to signpost effectively. And it always surprises me that some institutions simply haven't got their resources easily available to signpost with. You know, it should be, if we're going to use academics as tutors, one of the first things we should do when they join an institution is tell them what all the support services for students are. And for many, many years that didn't happen at my institution. You kind of found out as you were there, which was not very helpful if you were immediately thrown into being a personal tutor. Okay, yeah.
It might be quite interesting if that's okay, because I think I'm in a bit of a hybrid position between all of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Part of a very large institution that does have an academic support framework in existence, but because I do most of my teaching or all of my teaching on one of the health courses, we've almost developed a hybrid system to meet the requirements of both the university and the curriculum, if that makes sense. So we do have timetabled sessions that are part of modules and are therefore intra-curriculum, but students also have the opportunity to see their academic advisors on a one-to-one basis, but they need to request that. We also have students out on practice placements where they're away from university, and very often they bring in issues during those placements because they're visited by a tutor, which doesn't have to be their academic advisor on that placement, and that throws up sometimes a whole lot of issues. And then there is this whole university more pastoral support network alongside things like study support, well-being and all the rest of it. So it seems that yes, most of it is there, but it's all in different places.
Yeah, yeah. Which may well work if it's properly thought through and everybody knows where the possibilities are. I mean, it sounds as though you've got the facility for individual students to seek help, as well as a regular system for seeing all students, which might be one of the principles that you work with.
Yes,
the other interesting
because there's group sessions. Yeah.
The other interesting thing you said to me was that the person who sees them on placement isn't necessarily their advisor back at the institution. And one of the things that interests me is how much change you can afford to have within a personal tutor system, whether it's worth making an effort to try to make sure that where it's possible a student stays with the same advisor, or whether that matters all that much, actually, provided that there's good liaison between people.
It's difficult. That is actually something that is current. Well, it's not been a problem so far. It is something that's being reviewed at the moment. The trouble is that we cover a very large geographical area, and for everybody to have to visit, there's also relationships with our clinical educators and our partners there that are important. And if the same person goes out and visits students in that same locality, there is that relationship between the placement tutors and the academic tutor, although for the student that creates a bit of a dilemma between the fact that the academic advisor isn't necessarily the tutor who comes and visits them whilst they're on placement. It's not been a huge problem so far, but it is something that we are currently reviewing.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting, yes. The other, I mean, I'm talking about good liaison, but there's also the issues about confidentiality as well, because part of that liaison means that if you form a good relationship with somebody and you do share some personal stuff, you have to be extra careful about making sure you've got permission to share that if you're going to, you know, somebody else is going to take on that or something like that role and another part of the student's course. But then I suppose we face that problem with things like disability statements as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Kerry, you're actually getting all the stuff together on one site for that. That's all the that's for stuff for students, is it, or stuff for staff about um, central services and so on? Oh yeah, response to staff need, but have a space for students too. Yeah. Okay, Petra. Yeah, that makes sense. At least health staff are very conscious about that kind of issue. Yeah. What about this intracurricular versus extracurricular? I'm quite enthusiastic about the idea of academic programs having a module which is about skills development, where academic advisors or personal tutors act as the leaders of tutorial groups within that program, and therefore they have to get to know their tutees reasonably well, which has always been an issue. If you have a kind of remedial model, there are some students who never visit their personal tutor and don't know who they are. Whereas at least if you have particularly a year one module, the personal tutor has to get to know the tutees, and they get to know them by them coming on a regular basis and discussing things which are perhaps not quite, well, they're not so personal, they're about the development of academic skills in that discipline. Okay, yeah, so that is linked to employability, Kerry. And a lot of tutors at my university would say that they are not the people to give students advice on doing CVs, so there would have to be liaison with the Careers and Employability Service. Yes, that's true. You do know your tutees better, and you can say something personal about them. That's a big advantage. Can I ask another question, actually? To what extent, in your institutions, is all of this backed up by really good admin resources where you can access students' records and everything's together in one place? Because this much-touted ability to write references for students when you've got to know them through academic advising or personal tutoring does actually depend on somebody keeping good records or some system keeping good records. And it would take quite a pressure off academics if that kind of recording is done well and done centrally in some way. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, you're saying it is an improving picture, Petra. That's
Yes.
good. Yeah, that's good to hear. Hi, Jackie. Jackie, we're just discussing the kind of dimensions of difference that are up on the screen, and you can either join in on chat, or if you want your mic unmuted, you could join in that way.
I think Barbara's point, so this is Rob, I think Barbara's point, I think it's Barbara's point about students keeping the records themselves is an interesting issue, and how records are shared on that kind of basis. I suppose the other issue is how far recording is for reference writing, which is important, and how far it's a basis for a continuing conversation with students about their development as students, which puts it very firmly, as Janet was saying, in that kind of developmental frame in terms of rationales as opposed to in a kind of remedial context.
Who said that? Who made that comment about? Hang on a minute. Oh, that's Barbara. Actually, Barbara, it could be about students keeping records themselves in an e-portfolio, but I would envisage at this level something that wasn't privately owned by the student, where there was some link between the student record system and a student's private portfolio, and also that maybe the tutor had automatic access to this, or at least to part of it, so that it would be as much the tutor's record as the student's record. I mean, I can see the argument for saying the student ought to keep these records themselves, but I can also see huge problems with that. Right, yes. The kind of model that Petra's just suggested seems to me that you would have to be able to share it at certain points. Oh, they choose that. Okay. All right.
They've got choice in what they share.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's being embedded as part of modules, they have to they have to share elements of their portfolio to demonstrate progression through those modules. So they pull some of that together at some point.
Okay, so they choose what to share, but they have to share something that demonstrates progression.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, that's clear.
Can you hear me, Janice?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, I'm looking for something technical that I don't need to do there. Sorry.
Just talk.
I'll join in a little bit more now. Then I am listening.
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Jackie.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Yeah, we have a student system that holds all of the personal details. That when we're working as a personal tutor with them, we can look back over individual student records and see everything. And that's really helpful to get a bigger picture of the student, you know. So that's been
Kerry,
a big change.
Kerry, how does your student dashboard, is that developed by NTU or is it a proprietary piece of software? Do you know? Because that also is the kind of thing we're talking about, a shared student dashboard. Assessment results, attendance, library access, etc. Makes it possible to keep an eye on them. Yeah. Was that developed by NTU? Yeah, okay. It's a paid for. And it does sound really, really useful. Some of you will remember or will have seen the videos that we developed at CRA about, gosh, 7 or 8 years ago now, with University of Northampton, which had some had students from the drama department at Northampton acting out the part of students coming for a personal tutor interview. And that personal tutor interview actually assumed at that point that the tutor had that kind of information that Kerry's talking about kind of there in their office at their fingertips, so the tutor could look at the assessment results and so on with the student there. And of course at that point very few institutions had that kind of facility, whereas now more and more do, but still not, it's still not universal.
There's quite a time delay on some of the stuff we get access to though, so if there's an immediate problem, you've only got some historical data.
How long, Jackie? Because I was thinking about if you had a formal meeting with your QT once a term or once a semester, once the let's say the module results were in place, how long after the results being announced would you have to have the meeting? It's that kind of issue.
I think at the moment it's kind of available on the previous year, but I'm hoping that this year, obviously we don't get told any of this in advance, but I'm hoping that this first semester's results will be available to us in January or February, and I think that's one thing that running personal tutoring is going to improve, because we're going to need that sort of data in order to do the job, to look at the previous semester, not the previous year.
Absolutely, yeah. It's no good having it a year later.
No, no.
As it happens. In fact, well, two things occur to me. One is that was part of the thinking behind the HERE, that it would be a document available as it developed through the students' program to have this kind of discussion about. But also, you need more than just assessment results, and the kind of work that JISC is doing on gathering together things like text-based feedback on students' essays or projects, so that you actually get the details of what the formative feedback to the student is, as part of the information that the personal tutor would have.
Yes.
That would be really useful, because again, a decade ago we were trying to get students to extract that kind of formative feedback and record it and look for patterns in it. But that's asking an awful lot of students, whereas if you could collect that formative feedback together, you could see you as the tutor could see some of the patterns.
Yes. Well, I mean, we're like all universities now, we're having to do you know, electronic marking increasingly, nearly for everything. And I was just looking today at some feedback on some mark sheets that I've given that I was wanting to put into quick marks on, which is a Turnitin function that comes through Blackboard. And, you know, you're going to sort of aggregate a number of comments that are all, you know, all sort of indicate various levels of attainment. And I'm sure that because we're now going to start and feed them into the systems, that they must be able to take them out of there and almost pull out a record for the student on what did you get for that essay, what sort of feedback did you get?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I must say the NTU system sounds really interesting. I hope, Kerry, if we have another tutoring conference in future, you can either yourself or persuade some of your colleagues to come and present what's going on at NTU, because it does sound really quite innovative. Any of your institutions where it's moving away from academics doing this job, and the people who are doing the academic advising job are actually really professional services people? You know, they're hired to do academic advising rather than to be academics, the sort of American model. Yes, I take that, Kerry. Nobody in the particular groups.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting, because I do think the use of specialist advisors in line with the kind of American model seems to be growing in the UK higher education sector, but clearly none of your institutions as yet.
But it's interesting, a lot of our student services here at Northumbria are almost being depersonalised, so the students are just doing everything electronically. So they actually need to get to people more than ever.
Yeah. John, if you've got your mic on, can you say a little bit about the system at Newman then? If it's are your senior academic support tutors not academics then?
That's a good question. Originally the plan was that there would be 5 of them, each brought out for a day a week. They would be academics, and they would sit in an office in the student hub, so that there was somebody there all the time who could talk to them about their academic progress. The difficulty of recruiting academics to do that job has meant after some years of struggling with that, this year we have just appointed 2.6 people as senior academic support tutors who are not academics.
Yes, okay.
And they will share the
They're
work
in
between.
the whole institution, are they?
Yes. Well, no, they're the whole. They're those parts of the institution that don't have a personal or placement tutor system in place.
Okay, okay.
So humanities and social sciences and bits of non-ITE education.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the idea is that they can then guarantee a certain consistency in the application of regulations and mitigating circumstances and support and referring on and those sorts of things. But of course there is the issue then that they don't know the specifics of the course or program that the student is on.
Oh, exactly. But they do kind of know what other support is available.
Yeah.
So Petra, is it divided, I mean sort of formally divided in your institution between academic progress and student support? And how do you deal with the first issue?
No.
The issue? Yeah, go on.
No, it's not that formally divided. There's what we call student support officers, and they're really first point of call. There's always somebody there, whereas academics, as we all know, we're not always at our desk in times of crisis. So they deal with a lot of pastoral things. They deal with some technical things like I can't submit online or something is not quite right. Sometimes they deal with academic progress, but they work very much hand in hand with academic tutors, because they don't have the intimate knowledge about the curriculum and the employability issues very often that sort of sit alongside this. So they might get a query, some of them they'll be able to deal with if it's to do with academic progress, or they'll signpost students to services that the university runs centrally.
Yeah.
But very often for academic progress they'll refer on to the academic tutor.
Right, okay. Are they based in the department or faculty, or are they central?
No, they're in the faculty. They're in the same building.
I mean, if you're going to have a system like that, it's got to be local, not central somehow.
Yeah.
Ideally within the school or faculty or department or whatever.
I'd fight tooth and nail if they moved them central, because we've got 2 different campuses as well.
Well, that as well, but there does need to be that kind of personal knowledge, I think, of the academics and the student support people need to know each other and you know, have some liaison with each other.
You know, on occasion you end up with meetings where you get the academic tutor, the student and the student support officers, all 3 of them in the same room. That does happen.
Gosh,
and there's issues that are that does happen. If there's issues that impact on both the course and the whole thing. It doesn't happen that frequently, but it does on occasion happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, folks, the purpose of this webinar, as much as anything else, was to give you some sort of support about how you could write your first portfolio item about your own context. You'd have an idea about what kind of dimensions might be worth exploring and contrasting your institution with others. You feel that you've got some of those kinds of ideas out of it so far, or are there more issues you'd like to raise about that?
I think it's
Keeping
quite
an eye on the
useful.
time, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
Sorry, I was just going to say I think it's quite useful to see some structure in how we're having this discussion.
Yeah.
Because that helps to guide the writing. We all like a bit of structure with presenting stuff. So that is helpful in the discussion itself. It makes
certainly wouldn't, yeah, that's good. You certainly wouldn't have to go through all these dimensions, but you might find something that you would pick out and think, yes, that's a really key issue in our institution, and we have a strategy that is intended to address that and does this, or this is a real problem for us and we need to look at it, or whatever. Just gives you some points of reference.
What is the general feeling that you're getting from across the sector in terms of whether it's becoming a fluid kind of ideal, or is it still, got a lot of problems within it?
I think that's a really difficult question, Jackie. It depends who I talk to. You probably know I'm involved in the UK Advising and Tutoring Group as well, and the impression I get from the people in that is that there is a move towards more specialist student support and academic advising as a kind of profession in its own right. But that could be the people who are more involved in that particular organisation. I get the impression that personal tutoring or academic advising, call it what you want, has certainly regained its importance in the last 3 or 4 years. Certainly since the introduction of fees and the hike in fees, but also in connection with the development of the Higher Education Achievements report. But the actual issues seem to me to be the same issues that we discussed 20 or 30 years ago. I don't know what Rob thinks about it.
That's the worry.
I think the new element for me, and the kind of exciting element, is the technology and what the technology can do to make the process both less burdensome administratively, because certainly 30 years ago it was the keeping of records that was an absolute pain as far as I was concerned as an academic. But then I've never liked keeping records. So the idea of having all that information in one place, to me, is really exciting. But, of course, only a few universities have really taken advantage of that yet. They're not there, even some of the big ones that ought to be. So I think I find it a really difficult question to answer, and it's probably something that we ought to do some more research on, perhaps through these cohorts. Because I don't think we know what's going on. We haven't got a very clear idea what's going on. Emily Foster at Hull has done some research through UCAT, but I don't think she's finished analysing it. When she has, we'll make that available to the CSCRA cohorts as well.
Yes, that would be useful, because I think universities fall into the dangerous trap of, as soon as they have some data in a system, they measure rather than make values about what that data is and the richness of it. We just get hauled to account on a numbers game rather than the quality of the provision. And that's a danger, I think, for us.
I think that's very true. I mean, it's probably indicative of that is my impression that attendance monitoring has led the way when it comes to collecting extra data on students. The easiest thing to collect is have they attended, and that's not necessarily the most useful thing to collect.
No.
It has its use.
It tends to push you into a remedial kind of perspective, though, because the focus tends to be on those students who are not down as attending. So before you know where you are, there's a risk that it directs you to only to, or predominant to, a kind of retention remedial agenda, which is institutionally very important, but it may be at variance with what the policy says the institution is concerned to deliver.
Okay, so any more comments or questions from anybody?
Well, I suppose one final thing is, you know, as whoever the last speaker made quite a valid point there about recording the data, etc. But it's the type of relationship that the students have with the tutor. So, you know, they may come for support with a remedial issue, and that might be the only reason that they actually engage with you. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because, as you know, there's not a lot of time built into any of the, certainly not into my organisation, to have relationships outside of the timetabled classroom area. It's getting less and less now to do that. You do it on your own time, in your own self. And so you can't legislate for everybody else just because you do it in a certain way. So I think it's getting more complex, because the value of that relationship isn't always recognised if it's just a positive, you know, build on an acquaintance that takes a student forward and helps with CV, etc. That's not valued. It's just picking up the problems that seems to, you know, warrant.
It's even more. I think it's even more subtle than the issue about writing references, because if I go back to, you know, the Chickering and Gamson thing, why is it that contact between staff and students is an indicator of good undergraduate achievement? It feels like it must be something to do with making the student feel valued by the institution and known to the institution and belonging to the institution, and it's very difficult to know how to measure that. Okay, Terry's gone. Sorry, I should have said goodbye.
Okay then.
Okay, we're coming up to 1 o'clock. Cass, did you have an answer about whether on the recording you can make the chat available as well, or is that a confidentiality thing? Oh, great. That's good, because I think a couple of people have said that there's links in the chat that could be quite useful. Thanks. Okay, well, I've enjoyed that discussion.
Yes.
I'll go back to Emily and see how her survey is getting on and see if it's ready to publish it. And I hope it's given you some ideas for the first portfolio task as well.
Yes, lovely.
Nice to talk to you all.
And you. Thank you, Janice.
Take care.
Bye.